Moscow remains a threat to Europe's southeastern flank. As Russia's soldiers begin to pull back from the Ukrainian border, they leave not just tank tracks and footprints in the mud but a message to Ukraine and its western supporters that Moscow remains a threat to Europe's southeastern flank. Russia's announcement on Thursday that it would wind down its military buildup eased fears that the Kremlin was planning for a full-scale confrontation with Kyiv. The two nations have been mired in conflict since 2014, when Moscow-backed separatists started a war in Ukraine's Donbas region and Russia annexed Crimea. Meanwhile, a peace accord signed in Minsk in 2015 has stalled over Kyiv's reluctance to give the separatist-controlled areas autonomy in its constitution and Moscow's refusal to give Ukraine back control over its border before a handover of power in the Donbas. But with Volodymyr Zelensky, Ukraine's president, pleading this month for NATO membership and this week inviting Vladimir Putin to meet him in the conflict zone, the signal from the Russian leader was clear: Moscow still calls the shots in the Donbas. Zelensky's offer to meet Putin was a tacit acknowledgment that Ukraine cannot renege on the Minsk deal, said Michael Kofman, a senior research scientist at CNA, a U.S. policy studies nonprofit. They very much wanted to convince Zelensky that Kyiv needs to change policy course, he said. They really wanted to make Kyiv sweat and to show Ukrainians exactly what they can do to them eventually, that Ukraine will ultimately be largely on its own and that this is a reality his administration needs to face. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, center, meets the country's troops in Donbas this month. Russia's military buildup was aimed at persuading Kyiv to change course on its policy in the region, say analysts. Ukrainian presidential press office via AP. Putin's buildup also showed the West that from unfriendly rhetoric and escalation there is a price. And the price is a risk of real conflict, which nobody wants. The Kremlin's words were heard, said Alexander Bonov, a senior fellow at the Carnegie Moscow Center. The buildup may have convinced us President Joe Biden to de-escalate tensions with Russia after Washington introduced new sanctions against Moscow and warned of consequences if opposition leader Alexei Navalny, who has been on hunger strike in a Russian jail, died in prison, Bonov said. As the buildup began, Biden outraged Moscow by calling Putin a killer. Weeks later, the U.S. president invited Putin to a bilateral summit, indicating that, for all the new Western sanctions against it, Moscow is still welcome at the top table. Reducing the pressure a day after Putin warned the West against crossing Russia's red lines showed that the Kremlin understood that the level of escalation reached was suitable, but that they need to pull back a little to meet Biden's proposal, Bonov said. Putin wants to meet Biden and to try to charm him. Russia's military drills went far beyond any operation Moscow had previously conducted on the Ukrainian border since the signing of the Minsk deal. In recent weeks, Moscow moved 100,000 troops to the border with Ukraine from the east and the south, as well as tanks, aircraft, naval forces, field hospitals and electronic warfare equipment. Ceasefire breaches on the front line also rapidly increased, adding to the more than 14,000 people already killed in the war. The deployment gave Moscow enough military power to potentially conduct a fairly substantial military operation in Ukraine while keeping its intentions sufficiently vague to scare Zelensky, who called on Putin to agree to restore the ceasefire. The Russian problem was that the Ukrainians need to change course. And part of the reason they're on this course is because they're being backed by Europeans and Americans into believing that they can just maintain this position, Kofman said. Even as Russia's troops withdraw, Moscow still has the option of ratcheting up the pressure on Ukraine in the future. Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said Russia's 41st Combined Arms Army would leave its equipment and weapons at a base near the Ukrainian border ahead of joint military drills with Belarus this summer. Recommended Global Insight Ben Hall. Ukraine and its allies try to gauge Putin's appetite for war in recent months. Kyiv has sought to build up an alternative negotiating framework known as the Crimea Platform, which will hold a summit in August to discuss reversing Russia's annexation of the peninsula. More than 10 mostly Western countries as well as Turkey are believed to have expressed a willingness to take part. Alexei Arestovich, an advisor to Zelensky's chief of staff Andriy Yermak, said the border buildup had been a strategic bluff aimed at putting pressure on Ukraine to make concessions. Russia does not have the physical capability to wage war against Ukraine, Arestovich said. He suggested the drills were aimed at distracting domestic attention from Russia's slumping economy and boosting patriotic sentiment ahead of parliamentary elections in September. But Western powers' reluctance to match Putin's show of force on Ukraine's eastern border may make Zelensky's search for an alternative resolution to the conflict less tenable, Alyona Jitmanchuk, director of Kiev-based think tank New Europe Center, said. The troop withdrawal strengthens an argument that Putin didn't have an intention to invade but was using his trademark saber-rattling tactics in order to reach some diplomatic gains, Jitmanchuk said. But if Ukraine's Western allies avoided the Crimea Platform summit following the Russian maneuvering or failed to back its NATO aspirations, she added, Putin will find his military tactics successful and will repeat it again and again in the future.